Good day, viewers. Welcome to D's Take. As I said on my promotional video, I'll be having a take on quite a lot of issues of public interest, issues affecting Gambia, issues that New Gambia need to bring on the forefront. I want to talk about issues that interest you, me, our government, and people who really care about the going concern we all call the Gambia. Today, I've decided that we need to discuss the issue of domestic debt. We need to set the agenda forward. We need to make sure that our policymakers know what we want as polity, the people that they're serving. Today, Gambia and Gambians are suffering in terms of our budgetary allocations. Chunk of our budgetary allocations are going towards paying off interest. Imagine for every $1 that this country earns in the form of taxes, we spend quite a lot of it just taking care of interest payments, interest charges, not even the principal, but interest charges on our domestic debt. What domestic debt does, it allows a country to finance their deficit, and equally it allows monetary policymakers to mop up excess liquidity from the system. In terms of mopping excess liquidity out of the system, they make funds sterile. When funds are sterile, it means it's not being used. If funds are not being used, it doesn't have that much of an adverse effect. But if government is raising funds through T-bills by way of auction through the central bank, they use these funds to finance government operations. But if this funding is being used to finance operational expenditures, we have a problem. Because operational expenditures hardly or barely gain economic dividend. If funds were used for developmental issues, i.e. building a bridge, building a school, building hospitals, or building things that will yield an economic dividend for the country, it will serve a great purpose. Gambia's debt has really quadrupled to an exponential level whereby our debt sustainability has been an issue. Therefore, Gambia at this current moment has what you call a distressed debt burden. Our debt burden has really made this country suffer. How are we suffering? We're suffering because now government is really having issues prioritizing. And in this prioritizing, if government wants to do a school, government is first thinking of paying its debt obligation because it's owed to the public. When you owe to the public, government has recourse to pay. And that recourse is drawing down available resources that could have been used to develop this country. Therefore, debt is a problem, and debt has become a burden to the state. Domestic debt also creates a serious problem within the banking sector. It's called the crowding out effect. The crowding out effect is purely the reason why we have high interest rates in the Gambia. Interest rates are high because the government of the Gambia, through the central bank, is competing with banking services for deposits or depositor funds. Now depositors are buying treasury bills instead of making deposits at the bank. So for this to happen, government needs to entice depositors by giving them an interest rate that's relatively higher than what the banks can offer them. In so doing, we are really making our banking services suffer. This has forced banks to find other ways of making money, i.e. ledger fees, bank charges, and to a point also speculating heavily on Forex. So I think if the government really want a healthy banking sector, they need to stop and curtail the influence of the crowding out effect, which has really been a burden to investors, and entrepreneurs in Gambia. Imagine a country with an interest rate of over 20%, a double-digit interest rate. No one can do a viable business and be a going concern. This is why a lot of businesses are failing. So domestic debt has direct consequences and indirect consequences. And some of these indirect consequences are, an example of what a crowding out effect can do in the economy. The reason why we need to talk about this burden is to find a way to rationalize our overall debt profile, our overall debt package, and see how best Gambia can come out of the situation we find ourselves in. We are currently in a vicious circle that is a journey to nowhere, because we wake up in the morning, work hard as a nation, earn taxes, and these taxes that we earn are being used partially to pay off interest charges. Not even the principal, but just interest charges. This is not sustainable. This cannot develop Gambia, and Gambia can't go forward with this. Therefore, we need three things. First, the government of the Gambia need to rationalize its whole budget framework. And in so doing, the government need to rationalize its payroll. I mean, government payroll, it's taking a huge chunk of the government budget. Personal emoluments in 2017, whereby the government had an overall budget of 8.7 million, personal emoluments is in excess of close to $3 billion. That's just payroll and other things that government needs to pay on a monthly basis. Then you have other charges of over 4.8 billion. Other charges includes the subvention to the public enterprises, the NAWEX, the GAMTELs, you name it. Anything that is a subvented institution by the state needs to get part of that budget. Then you have the debt service, which is almost about $3 million. So it means $3 million of our funds are going towards sustaining the interest charges on a monthly basis in our budget. What's left for the country to survive? Nothing. And that's why we're having deficit financing. The reason we're having deficit financing is total revenues collected by the state is not enough to cover total expenditures owed by the state to various services. Therefore, we have a recourse to public borrowing through the central bank by way of T-bills. This borrowing has gone to in excess of about $3 to $3.5 billion. That's a lot of money, and these are monies that this government cannot afford, the people of the Gambia cannot afford, and it's really deterring our developmental plans. It's really derailing where Gambia ought to go. So going forward, we need to find a way and strike a balance. The balance is we need a lean, mean government that is very small but highly effective. Therefore, we need a retrenchment exercise. Some people don't like to hear this word, but there has to be a bitter pill and someone has to swallow it. Who better to swallow it than the Gambians? We cannot leverage the life of generations yet unborn to finance the lifestyle of us living in Gambia today. Therefore, we need to go through a retrenchment exercise. We need to rationalize our whole budget and budgetary processes and make sure that our revenues are in line with our expenditures. But currently, Gambia's expenditures are highly bloated, and therefore we get a recourse to finance our deficit through treasury bills. So what we need to do is streamline and rationalize our budget, and secondly, change our debt profile. Our debt profile has a short-term nature. The reason why it has a short-term nature is today the T-bill has a 365-day maturity. From 30 days to 90 days, 180 days, maximum 365. This is very short. So what we need to do is to have a rescheduling. Rescheduling of our debt calls for the government of the Gambia to come up with medium-term debt instruments. If we have medium-term debt instruments, we will have bonds. Bonds can be anywhere between 3 to 7 years. What that does, it spreads the interest payments that we still have to pay, and it prolongs the principal that government has to pay out. Once this is done, we have respite and relief. If we have this relief, government can reorganize itself. So what we're trying to do is we need to find a smooth landing whereby government over a period can change the profile of its debt and also tame the excesses of the fiscal operators and make sure that the monetary authorities are in line with what the fiscal operators want. And also we need to institute legally by way of legislation a debt ceiling. A debt ceiling meaning the government of the Gambia through the Ministry of Finance cannot borrow nothing more than an X percentage of the total budget. Let's say we put a percentage of 5% of the budget, we cannot exceed that for deficit financing. That will help tame the appetite of the fiscal authorities in terms of borrowing. So if it's legislated, it means they cannot go out of legislation to bust the budget. So domestic debt really has been a problem for this nation. And we're all talking about New Gambia. We have quite a lot of expectations for New Gambia. But we have to be realistic that New Gambia cannot be set on good footing if we didn't make a U-turn from the past. The U-turn is our budgets are highly bloated. In the past, government used to have quite a lot of budgetary support from donor countries and multilateral agencies. These funds have dried up over the past few years, especially during the last regime, and therefore we resorted wholly and solely to financing our deficit by borrowing from the central bank. That's not going to go forward. It's not going to be sustainable. So let's put the brakes now, swallow the bitter pill as a nation, restructure our fiscal operations, and make sure that the New Gambia is premised on sound fiscal fundamentals. These fiscal fundamentals is the only way out development and sustained growth can be anchored on. So I will be doing more talks in the future, but for today I just wanted to share a little bit about domestic debt and how we can bring this to our policymakers and our government to tell them that yes, we are the people of the going concern called the Gambia, and we want and we demand and we instruct our government to tame our appetite for borrowing, because we cannot leverage the lives of Gambians that are yet unborn to finance a lifestyle, and this lifestyle is a recurrent lifestyle and is not adding any socio-economic or infrastructural development to the lives of people who will come after us. Therefore, domestic debt has to be tamed, domestic debt has to be reviewed, and it has to be a commitment. So New Gambia and the new administration should have a commitment to streamline our fiscal operations. Thank you, and watch out for more. This was D's take on domestic debt. So you'll be hearing from me on other issues of concerns to you, me, and the partners who want to work with us, Gambia. So on that note, a good thank you to all.